Welcome to Creepy Conjures, where the eerie meets the unexplained. Step into a world of dark tales and sinister secrets, where every story is a doorway to fear. Dare to enter, and let the nightmares begin. Story number 1. It's just past midnight, and the hospital is quiet. Eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps itself around you, making you hyper-aware of every creak, every rustle of paper, every hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. It's the usual routine. The phones haven't rung in over an hour, and the only visitors are the occasional nurse wandering in to grab a coffee from the machine in the corner. It's slow, and that's how I like it. I glance at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticks slowly, almost lazily, as if it knows how long the night is stretching ahead of me. The lobby is dim, lit only by the desk lamp and the weak light from the vending machines. Shadows pool in the corners, deep and dark, and I can't shake the feeling that they're watching me. I rub my eyes and lean back in my chair, trying to stave off the drowsiness creeping in. It's always like this on the night shift. The lullaby of the hospital's ambient noises, the distant beeps of machines, the faint chatter from the staff rooms far down the hall. It's like a strange symphony that only those who work these hours can appreciate. But tonight, something feels off. A soft thud echoes from down the hall, and I stiffen. It's probably just a door closing somewhere, I tell myself. It happens all the time. Still, I can't help but peer down the hallway, trying to see past the circle of light cast by my desk lamp. The corridor stretches out, empty and still. Then I hear it again. A low, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the linoleum. My heart skips a beat, and I hold my breath, listening intently. It's coming from the direction of the old wing, the part of the hospital they don't use anymore. They say it's going to be renovated, but it's been years, and it still sits there, dark and abandoned. I know I should ignore it. It's probably just an animal or something. But curiosity, or maybe it's something else, something deeper like fear, drives me to stand up. I grab my flashlight from the drawer and, with a final glance at the clock, I step out from behind the desk. The hallway is cold, colder than it should be. I tighten my grip on the flashlight and start walking toward the noise. My footsteps echo in the empty corridor, and I can feel my pulse quicken with each step. The hospital is a maze of turns and doorways, but I know this place well enough to navigate it even in the dark. As I approach the old wing, the air grows even colder. The dragging sound has stopped, but now there's a soft whisper, like the wind moving through cracks in the walls. I tell myself it's just the building settling, but my nerves are fraying with every passing second. I reach the double doors that lead to the old wing. They're slightly ajar, though I'm certain they were closed earlier. My hand trembles as I push one of the doors open with a creak. The beam of my flashlight cuts through the darkness, revealing dusty floors and empty rooms with broken furniture piled in corners. I take a cautious step inside, and that's when I see it, a shadow, darker than the others, moving at the far end of the corridor. It's not a person, at least not like any person I've ever seen. It's tall, impossibly tall, and it seems to glide rather than walk. For a moment I'm frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The shadow pauses, as if it senses my presence, and then it slowly turns. I don't wait to see more. Panic surges through me and I turn on my heel, sprinting back the way I came. My breath comes in ragged gasps, and the hallway seems longer than before, stretching out endlessly. The flashlight wobbles in my hand, its beam jumping wildly as I run. Behind me I can hear that dragging sound again, but now it's faster, closer. I burst through the door and slam it shut behind me, leaning against it as I try to catch my breath. The lobby is just as I left it. Quiet, still, safe. But the safety feels fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. I slump back into my chair, hands shaking. I tell myself it was nothing, just my tired mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know what I saw. Or maybe I don't. Maybe it's better that way. The clock ticks on, the minutes crawling by, and the hospital remains quiet. But now, every creak, every whisper of wind makes me jump. The shadows in the corners seem to shift when I'm not looking. I keep the flashlight on the desk, within easy reach, and I wait, counting the hours until dawn, hoping that whatever it was stays in the darkness where it belongs. And for the rest of my shift, I don't dare leave the light. Story number 2. I didn't expect my Saturday night to end in an emergency room, but here I was, cradling my swollen, broken finger against my chest. It was supposed to be a simple pick-up basketball game with friends, a quick way to blow off some steam after a week of cramming for finals. But I misjudged a pass, and the ball slammed into my hand at just the right angle to snap my pinky like a twig. The pain was sharp, immediate, and all-consuming. By the time I made it to the hospital, my finger was an ugly mix of purple and red, swelling up like a balloon. The receptionist barely glanced up as I walked in, waving me toward the waiting area after checking me in. I found a seat in the corner, trying to keep my mind off the throbbing in my hand by focusing on the flickering television mounted on the wall. It was playing some nature documentary that I wasn't really watching. The waiting room was mostly empty, save for a few other unfortunate souls who looked just as miserable as I felt. Across from me, a man sat slumped in his chair, his hood pulled low over his face. Something about him put me on edge. A nervous energy that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a furnace. He kept fidgeting, his leg bouncing up and down, eyes darting around the room like he was searching for something or someone. A nurse called my name, but just as I was about to stand, the man across from me shot up, knocking over a stack of magazines. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and I could see now that his hands were shaking. He mumbled something under his breath, incoherent and frantic, as he stumbled toward the reception desk. "I need something! Now!" he demanded, slamming his hands down on the counter. The receptionist tried to calm him, but he wasn't listening. His voice grew louder, more erratic. I couldn't tell if it was desperation or anger, or maybe a mix of both, but it was clear that something was very wrong. I stayed seated, my heart pounding in my chest. The nurse who had called my name hesitated, looking between me and the man at the desk, unsure of what to do. The situation escalated quickly. He started shouting, cursing at the receptionist, accusing her of withholding medication. The other patients in the waiting room looked just as alarmed as I felt. I glanced around for any sign of security, but before I could spot anyone, the man turned on his heel and started pacing back and forth, his agitation growing by the second. Then, without warning, he stormed toward me, his eyes locking onto mine as if I were somehow the source of his frustration. "Are you looking at me?" he snarled, stepping closer. I could smell the sweat and the unmistakable tang of something chemical on his breath. I shook my head, raising my good hand in a placating gesture. "I'm just here for my finger, man," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But he wasn't hearing it. In 2 quick strides, he was right in front of me, his fist clenched. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I wanted to get up, to move away, but I was frozen, my mind racing to figure out how I'd gone from worrying about a broken finger to fearing for my safety. Before he could do anything, a burly security guard appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us with a firm but calm demeanor. "Hey buddy, let's take a step back," the guard said, placing a hand on the man's chest and gently pushing him away from me. The man resisted at first, but the guard was persistent, speaking in low, soothing tones that eventually got through. The man's shoulders slumped, and he took a few shaky steps back, but then his mood flipped again, and he lashed out, swinging wildly at the guard. I flinched, my body tensing as the guard deftly dodged the blow and grabbed the man's arm, twisting it behind his back. The nurse had already called for backup, and within seconds, 2 more guards arrived, helping to subdue the man. It took all 3 of them to wrestle him to the ground without hurting him. As they restrained him, I saw the man's face up close. There was fear in his eyes, raw, unfiltered fear. I didn't know what kind of demons he was battling, but it was clear they were winning. The hospital staff quickly moved in, injecting him with something to calm him down. His body went limp, and the fight drained out of him as he was gently lifted onto a gurney and wheeled away. The chaos in the room settled, and the tension that had gripped my chest finally began to ease. The nurse, who had been watching the whole scene, finally approached me again, her face pale but composed. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Yeah," I breathed. She led me back to an exam room, and I was finally able to get my finger looked at. The doctor confirmed the break and set it in a splint. As I left the hospital, my hand bandaged and my nerves still frayed, I couldn't shake the image of that man's terrified eyes. I realized that my broken finger was nothing compared to whatever had driven him to that point. The night had been harrowing, but as I walked out into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't just because my finger was taken care of, it was the relief that came from knowing that, even in the face of fear, I had managed to keep my head. And that, with the help of others, I'd come through it unscathed. Story number 3. The end of a double shift is always the hardest. My eyes were heavy, and every minute seemed to stretch out like an eternity. The city streets were quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd dealt with all day. I was driving back to the hospital, my ambulance humming softly, the streets bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. Just a few more blocks, I told myself. A quick debrief, maybe a cup of coffee, and I'd be free to collapse into my bed. As I turned onto a narrow, deserted road, I noticed a figure up ahead. At first, I thought it was just another late-night pedestrian, maybe someone who'd had a bit too much to drink. But as I got closer, I realized it was a woman, standing completely still in the middle of the road. I slowed the ambulance, squinting through the windshield. She was wearing a long dark coat, her hair hanging in front of her face like she was trying to hide. Something about her posture made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. She wasn't just standing there, she was rigid, like a statue. I rolled down the window and leaned out. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need help?" She didn't respond, didn't move. Her head was slightly tilted, and as I strained to see her face, I realized I couldn't. The way her hair fell, it obscured everything, as if she had no face at all. "Ma'am," I called again, my voice a little shakier this time. Nothing. Not even a flinch. I put the ambulance in park, the engine still running, and hesitated. Every instinct told me to just keep going, to finish my shift and let someone else deal with whatever this was. But the EMT in me, the part that had been trained to help, no matter what, wouldn't let me leave her there. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the night. The air was cooler than I expected, and a shiver ran down my spine. The woman was still there, standing completely still as I approached. "Ma'am, I'm with EMS," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and professional. "If you're hurt or need assistance, I'm here to help." I reached out to touch her shoulder, hoping to gently guide her out of the road. But just as my hand was about to make contact, she turned her head slightly, and I froze. There was something off about her. The way she moved, the way she stood, it wasn't natural. And then I noticed her hand hanging limply by her side. It was pale, almost translucent, the veins standing out in stark relief. But what really caught my eye was her nails, long, sharp, and dark, like claws. She turned her head a little more, and finally I saw a glimpse of her face beneath the curtain of hair. Her skin was ashen, her eyes wide and glassy, unblinking. And her mouth. Her lips were stretched into a grotesque smile, too wide, too forced. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled back a step. "Ma'am, I think you need to come with me," I managed to stammer, though my voice lacked the confidence I was trying to project. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, smiling that horrible smile. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across her face, making her features seem even more distorted. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the flashlight died. Total darkness. I fumbled with it, my heart racing. When I finally got it back on, she was gone. Just gone. No sound, no trace, nothing. The road was empty, silent except for the distant hum of the city. I spun around, searching the shadows, half expecting her to be right behind me. But there was no sign of her. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Had she run off? But how could she have moved so quickly, so silently? I backed toward the ambulance, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the door handle. I jumped in, slammed the door and locked it, as if that would somehow protect me from whatever that was. My heart was pounding in my ears as I threw the ambulance into gear and sped back to the hospital. When I finally pulled into the bay, I sat there for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My rational mind tried to convince me it was just fatigue, that I'd imagined it, that there had to be a logical explanation. But deep down, I knew better. That woman, whatever she was, wasn't something I could explain away. And as I sat there, staring out at the empty parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, watching, waiting. I didn't say a word to anyone as I handed in my report and clocked out. What could I say? That I'd seen a ghost, a demon. No one would believe me. Hell, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But as I drove home that night, every shadow seemed darker, every corner more sinister. And I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that twisted smile staring back at me. You've reached the end of another dark tale from Creepy Conjures. If the story left you with chills, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more haunting horrors. Don't forget to ring the bell so you'll be the first to know when the next nightmare is unleashed. Until we meet again, stay safe if you can.